strategize together. Let's hear it from an expert. Join the conversation, it's informative and free. You and me, let's talk some strategy. Now here's your host, Morin-van.
Hello everybody, I am Morin-van and I'm your host. Today I have a special guest all the way from Suriname joining me, and we'll be talking about systemizing things, automation, and maybe even AI. So stay tuned for that. But before I introduce you to this guest, I want to welcome everybody who's here live for the Strategy Talks show, as well as those who listen to Strategy Talks as a wonderful podcast. So without much further ado, I want to welcome our sponsor, Social Insider. A quick shout out to them. They are the intuitive dashboard for social media analytics, reporting, and competitors analysis for brands and agencies. If you need data, you need Social Insider. So here is Diego Amaarali. Did I say that right, Diego? I forgot to ask you how to say your last name.
No, that's perfect. That's perfectly fine. Hi, Doreen.
Hey, how are you today?
I'm doing great. It's been, I guess, a good morning, but it's kind of weird being on the other side, being a podcast host myself. So
yeah,
I had that nagging feeling to do my intro as well as you started the show.
I love that. So we're going to talk about system building, automation, and AI. But before we do, I want to let people know who you are. So Diego is a driven, free-spirited individual who has a great affinity and passion for technology and design. As a creative explorer with over 10 years of experience in design, highly engaging photography, and visual storytelling, he's extremely passionate about capturing the human element. In 2020, audio caught his attention and he birthed the Convos podcast, a personal media project covering entrepreneurship, creativity, personal finance, and self-development. I've been on that podcast. As an On Deck Fellowship alumni, he engages a wide range of guests and feeds a community of self-motivated creatives to reach their highest potential. Diego is happy to call Suriname home, where more than likely he can be found brewing a cup of Japanese sencha. What is that? Is that some sort of tea?
Yeah, so I got a gift when I left my study as New Zealand from my Asian friends, and I was fascinated by the diverse types of teas there were, and yeah, I just loved it. It's just an experience. You got to try it.
All right, I'll go try that. So let's start talking about as system building as a strategy. One of the things that when I started my company years and years ago, 12 years ago, I was doing everything myself. And when I was ready to outsource my first project, the person I outsourced to asked me for SOPs.
Hello?
Oh, hello. Are you back?
Hello?
I see you. Can you see me?
Yeah, you froze.
I know. That's weird. That has never happened to me. Wow, that's crazy. All right, off we go. We'll just have to go with the flow. Hopefully no other Wi-Fi disconnections are happening. Okay, so system building, automation, SOPs, right? In order to outsource, if you're building a business, in order to outsource, you have to have systems, because if you can't tell somebody what they need to do, they can't do it for you. So how does somebody get started with system building? And I know we talked about this in the green room, Diego, you have a engineering mind. You are an electrical engineer, so you think differently. How does that apply to system building? How can somebody who doesn't have that background still understand system building and what kind of systems they need?
So system building, how I perceive it, is basically understanding processes, understanding the fundamental ways things work, and eventually it should be something that's replicable. So you want to build systems for things that you repeat a lot, for things that you want someone else to do, for things that you want to outsource to somebody. If you have a process, it doesn't even have to be a whole complicated system with in the mechanical or engineering sense. It can just be a process that steps that someone needs to follow. And once you got that down, it's basically just a set of instructions and rules and guidelines for them to just, in I think you're familiar with the if else statements in Excel or basic programming. It's basically a huge set of if else statements, and it just makes the process so much easier and wins you time in the end.
So if we're talking about strategically using systems in a business, what are some of the systems that we could automate that we might not have thought about?
So if you're thinking about business, especially if you're starting out on your own, you do everything yourself, right? From you're the salesperson, you're the marketeer, you're the finance administrator, you're the content creator. Depending on what you do everything else. And I would say if you're thinking about automation, instead of outsourcing it or expanding the team, what are processes that you do a lot that you can see it like the frequently asked questions that people ask you? What are the things that you have to do every time during a sales process? You have to send an invoice, right? Can you automate that process that maybe it's a recurring client that just needs to pay monthly? Automate that in a system and that it gets sent automatically through the email with automatic reminders. So you don't need to sit behind them every time because the process is already in place. Like you have the design template ready. And even in content creation, if you're doing the podcast, for example, you need show notes. Maybe you have a onboarding process that the guest fills in. I know in our process, you had a form that I needed to fill in. You can take that a step further, that it goes into maybe extracts. If they uploaded a bio, extracts that, make it a shorter form version with AI, because we're talking about automation and AI in this process. And you can make that easier. Maybe in our process could now be done in 10 minutes if you have the system in place. So it just wins you a lot of time and resources that you could spend on the more creative pursuits that aren't that replicable.
Okay, so let's dive into that. I love that. So podcasting, for example, yes, I asked you to be my guest and I send you a Google form. You're saying that once you fill out the Google form, you can then use AI to take those fields and put the answers where they need to go. I now literally go in manually and grab the bio. I manually grab the headshot. I get all the information that I need from you because the Google form, that's automation. You're saying to then take it one step further and use AI to then maybe have your bio put in my script, right? I have to, and that's that's kind of systematized. It's not necessarily automated, but I have an example script that every week I just make a copy and then I put your name on it. So your script said Diego script and your bio goes in there and the questions that I have for you go in there. So you say that's something that could be automated and used.
Yeah, so you already automated one part of the process because you're slowly building a database, right? And you have certain steps. You have your standard outline ready. Of course, you adjust that based on the conversation, based on the topic. But think, for example, if you were to take it a step further, maybe the guest adds resources and has articles, and you don't have the time to go through everything, but you have captured that into your system, and then you feed that into an AI program. There's a lot of platforms now. We can talk about those platforms in a bit, and then let it extract some things to talk about. What is Diego known for? What are topics you could talk about that you yourself haven't thought of yet? And then maybe you'll get some suggestions and see how to integrate that in the actual process.
That's great. That's really helpful. So now let's talk about the marketing part of that, because we're going to use podcasts as an example. You have a podcast. I have a podcast. What kind of systems have you built to promote, to market, to repurpose your podcast? Because that's strategic thinking, right? If you fly by the seat of your pants every week and go, oh, I'm just going to post it here or there, that's not really automation. But if you have a system in place to repurpose, to reuse the content every single week in a very organized way, then you assure as many, eyeballs on that content or ears listening to your podcast as possible, with minimal effort, right? So you get a higher ROI. What do you do for your podcast? If you are willing to share, that could be something that somebody might be listening to and go, oh, I didn't think to automate that part.
Yeah, of course. So for us, when we started the podcast, I think 2.5 years ago, it's been a slow burn. So the first commitment me and my co-host did is we're gonna do it every week. That was just the mere minimum commitment. We didn't have a system yet, and over time we slowly built a system. At first, it was just manually reaching out to guests, and then I built a system, a Calendly link, as you use as well, that they can book. You put the slots in, so you don't need to think about it anymore. You can just mass reach out to people. Once they booked it, they put in their information. You contact them to confirm it. Okay, you got a bio. You do some research, and then you can use that bio and research to draft questions, and you have the photo. So I made a Canva template. People say don't use Canva as a designer, but if it simplifies your process, it's not rocket science. Build a template, just drag and drop a photo. It instead of thinking of the design like 5 to 10 minutes, you just do it in 30 seconds now, and then you have a caption ready.
I was gonna say I use Canva. If you're watching this, you see the backdrop every week. It's a template, obviously. Our covers for any of our our thumbnails are Canva, and yes, having a template makes things much easier. All right, what else?
So I'm not going to talk about the AI part yet, but what we started to do over time, in the editing post-production process, I knew early on that having transcripts would be useful for micro content in the future, or maybe making it searchable. So we didn't use that immediately, but from early on, we used AI, like the transcription tools, to transcribe the whole conversation. Of course, it's not 100% accurate, but 85% is more than enough just to get an understanding of what the conversation is. So we built that database. So now we can just search, oh, we had this guest on, what did we talk about? And I can feed that now, since AI has developed further, to extract key points, key insight from that conversation instead of listening to the whole hour conversation. And of course, the sooner you do it, you remember the conversation, you can fact check it. Was that really correct? But it saves you time. You don't need to go all in on that. After that, you can go into micro content. So that's the process we're in right now. So we got some help to create micro content, but because we have these systems in place, like the transcriptions, we can just send that database, and they use that instead of someone who doesn't know about the podcast or show to go listen to all the episodes. That's over 100 hours. Come on, no one has time for that. So you just send them the key insights, and they base it off of that. So that's kind of what we did. And especially with the development of AI lately, it's become much more easier. And with images, with text especially, to kind of get some key insights. I'd say there was a study done that maybe by the year 2030, at least 50% of content on the internet would be generated or kind of been created with the help of AI. So
That makes
lots
a
of the
lot of
content
sense.
might be robots.
I was going to say, it makes a lot of sense. The development I've seen, and you've probably been watching this even longer than I have, because this is part of what you do for other people. To me, AI, I've been using it for years, but not necessarily always recognizing it as AI, but, predictive tests, Siri, there's all kinds of things out there that we use on a daily basis that are generated by AI. But I started seeing the prompts, in Google Docs. You want to write this, and all of my tools now, all my automation tools have now added AI capability. So you go in the tool to upload something and it says, would you like me to write it for you? And that's amazing. So I can see the progress just from quarter one through quarter four, where we are right now in 2023. I can see where, yeah, you're mentioning 2030. I can see that exponential growth for sure. So if you're watching this, if you're listening to this podcast and you're still, I mean, this is, I think, I've had several guests on that talk about AI. I love that we're talking about automation and AI, how they work together. But if you've not embraced it, if you're scared of it, you're gonna lose out. And here is the quote that I loved. AI is not gonna replace your job. It's people who use AI are gonna replace your job if you don't use it. So that's what you need to know. So Diego, we talked about content creation. You talked a little bit about finances. How could somebody use system building, automation, AI for sales? I just want to give
So
like kind of an overview. If you're the business owner, if you're the, there might be people listening and watching that, are doing different parts in their business or might have a different job description. And they might, sales is a very one-on-one sort of, it's an intimate relationship that you're building with somebody. How would you use automation or AI for that and still have it be authentic?
yeah, so I think that authentic part is the important part, right? Because people don't want to be approached by robots. I myself, when I'm on LinkedIn, I see these ads and these DMs. I don't even bother opening them. So I would approach it if you're thinking about system building, from a systems process. Evaluate, if you're in sales, evaluate what are things that you repeatedly have to do. What are things that you kind of find tedious and want to replace that with AI. So, for example, you have the one-on-one conversation, but maybe you want to send a reminder or a summary. We have an online meeting about a project, and there's an AI tool that can record, listen into the project, and make notes for you. So you could use that tool at the end of the conversation, that it automatically derives the key takeaways from that conversation, the tasks and the deadlines maybe that have been set, because it can detect like, oh, they spoke about August 24th. We need to have a meeting. By 1 week after that, we should have a draft and review. So you can put that in a task, and it could be automated into an automatic email that goes to both parties. Like, this is what we discussed during the meeting. You still had the personal one-on-one conversation with the person, but you automated the process of, making a summary. So you don't necessarily need a note taker or someone. So you can just focus all your energy on the person. So that's one way you could do it. And the other side would be to analyze data. So we talked about it from the salesperson perspective when you engage, but sometimes you also need to analyze data, right? How many clients from this region do I have? How many clients take this service, for example?
Sure.
So you analyze that data and you see like, okay, maybe my service B isn't as requested. So should we tone that down? You could do an A/B test. So all these tools exist to efficiently and in a highly fast way process data. And of course, you still need to be able to interpret that data. It will make a summary for you, but you still need the core principles of understanding and know what to do with the data.
Yeah, it's kind of like social media marketing strategy, right? Data can tell you a lot of the information that you need, but the interpretation, you need an analyst or an analytic mind to say, well, if A is B or A plus B happens, then we should do C or we should do D, right? So you need to be able to interpret that and then apply it to what your goals are. So I love that. So how about research? Can you depend on AI to do research for you? Say you're in sales or even when you're in marketing and you want to write an article about something. How much do you trust AI, or do you have we're talking about system in place, Diego, to cover your butt? Like, what if, because that happened in the US this year where lawyers went into court and had used Chat GPT to find, evidence of court cases, and turns out those court cases were completely fabricated by Chat GPT and they weren't real and they didn't do their homework. So how can you make sure that the information and the research you get are correct?
So as you said, they didn't verify if the sources were actually legit. So I would say, yes, you can use it to, you know, jump as a jumping off point to quickly gather resources, ideas, and directions for your topic or anything that you're doing your research on, and have that as a draft. Of course, you can ask for resources, and I tried it. I asked, give me citations or sources, and sometimes it gives me links, but those links don't exist. So in that case, you'll have to manually check it out, search, and if it's actually, because it got the information from somewhere, maybe it synthesized it for 2, 3 different sources and made one comment about it. So that's the tricky part. But I think we shouldn't completely rely on AI, right?
All right, that makes
At the end of the day, it's a tool. Just like we had Google in the 2000s, the search tool was revolutionary back then. You could search for information far and wide from across the world. And now that's just been, it's on steroids now. You have something that synthesizes the information. But if you're a real researcher, an academic, or a journalist, you need credible sources. So you can draft something really quick, but you still need to verify. So if you're in that field and you're doing that, don't forget to also verify it personally, find the sources. You can ask the AI to generate some sources. And as you mentioned, prompting is an essential skill now.
Yes.
Just like we had Googling, it's become a verb. So prompting is one of the skills that kind of we need now. And I do think if you're a systems thinker, because you need to understand how the AI works to get exactly what you want. And there's this meme going around from creatives, designers, and salesperson like, oh, AI is going to take our job. And you mentioned in your quote, no, it's the people using AI is going to take our job. I'd like to add to that, most clients don't know what they want. So it is you as an individual, as a salesperson, to find out what the client wants. And you need to specifically be able to input that in the AI to get the output that you want. So if you don't know what you want and you don't know how to prompt it, you won't get the output you want.
Right. And that's such good advice, Diego, because I think we are in this bubble of marketing and AI is everywhere for us. But there's a lot of people out there that don't use it. There's sales teams out there that are still working with pen and pencil and paper and notebooks, and they're not even automated on computers, never mind using AI. And we are so far along especially in our industry of marketing, that we forget that others are not there yet. So reiterating the fact that you need to learn how to input and understand how AI thinks and works is actually really, really valid point. So we are not quite at the end, but I want to kind of steer us towards what not to do, Diego. It's always good. We hear all the things to do and we're like, yeah. But sometimes learning what not to do is also very insightful. Is there something that we should not automate? Is there something that you say you should only automate it and hire a professional? What are some things we should never do?
I think the most important thing is that how would it even look like to automate, right? If you ask that question, is the sales part, the in-person part, the sales part, understanding what the needs are. That's kind of hard to automate. You can have the AI as a companion to help you probe through the data as you receive it, but you yourself need to be there for the person to, show empathy, show understanding, show them that they feel heard. So that part, I don't think we could automate unless the AI becomes sentient and then has some, human face. But even that might feel artificial, I think. I can now recognize images that have been generated by AI because they're so refined. It lacks the grunginess, right? It's too perfect.
Yeah.
So
I love
think
that. I was going to say, I love that you said that you can't automate emotions. That's really what you said. And I was
Yeah.
like, that is really insightful because not being able to automate that empathy and that, interpreting what people say. If somebody says, I don't feel great, they might be saying, I'm having a really hard day and I'm, having a mental health crisis, but they're not saying that. So, reading between the lines as humans, we can interpret information from facial expressions, the tone it's said, the way they look. If we've seen people before, they might have a grayish color, or they might be blushing, or they might look flushed. So, seeing body language and reading in between the lines, that's something that I don't know if that's something that AI could ever completely detect or automate. But I think for now, you're right. For sales, we need that one-on-one. Now, you can use video. I know you are big into video. You can use video to automate some processes of sales, right? Frequently
Yeah.
asked questions. You can make a video for each question. Demos. You can give a live demo and answer questions, or you can say, here is our standard demo, and then I'll meet with you for 15 minutes for the question portion, right? So
Yeah, for the more in-depth part.
yeah, so certain things you can automate, but then others you really need a human there to answer those questions.
So what I do like to add on the video part is there are tools now. I think Descript has it built in to make or convey that emotion or capture the eye contact. Because one thing with video is, you need to look straight into the camera so people feel like you're talking to them, whereas it's just a mechanical device with some light in front of you. And some people have, trouble with that. They look at a screen, they take notes. So Descript now has a tool, for example, and I think NVIDIA, the video card manufacturing company, has an engine as well, where they can, like the eye contact with AI, make sure that your gaze is always straight into the camera. So you could look away like this, but your gaze is going to be locked into that. And that kind of can help capture it, but I don't think it will beat the in-person experience. But for an online platform, it does bring it closer.
Have you used that feature? Because I saw somebody on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago talk about that and use it. It seemed creepy because it didn't seem right as the head was turning and then the eyes are like
Yeah.
it was really, I think it works that if you don't necessarily move your face very much,
Yeah,
if
so,
you might
so
be
you need
looking
to
at
keep
your
it
nose.
natural.
Yeah, it was a little creepy, but yeah, that's very interesting. So let's wrap it up. Let's talk about tools real quick. We've got a couple of minutes, Diego, and you are probably using all sorts of tools for both automation and AI. What are some of your favorite tools? I heard you say Descript. I use it too for my podcast, so that's wonderful. What does it do, and what other tools should we look into?
Yeah, so if you're into content creation, I do recommend Descript, not only for audio, but video as well. And especially with the tools, built-in AI tools, because you can have a crappy recording. Well, the output is always dependent on the input, but it can salvage it through AI because they have this module that's studio sound that kind of simulates like you are in a professional studio. So maybe you don't have all this foam. They can simulate that and make it more clear. And that also auto transcribes it. So what I do in my process, I have Descript, I get the transcription from that. I built my system in Notion because Notion is a really cool tool for note taking, databases. So all my guests, I have a database there with their photo, links to that. And they implemented AI as well. So I use the transcript to then, on their profile, extract key insights they gave during the conversation. So that's one tool you could use. If you're using different tools like Calendly for scheduling, you could link that up with Zapier or Integrify. Those are automation platforms that kind of link different tools with each other. So the inputs get fed through the other tool. So I've been busy building an integration with Calendly, so it automatically goes to my Notion calendar and automatically makes the database or the row in that database for the next guest. And I think if we're talking about images, Canva has a lot of integration as well, but there's tools like Stable Diffusion, Midjourney that can generate images for you based on what you really need. Because sometimes you go to stock photo size and you think, I need that, but it's not just right, or you know, it doesn't feel original. So you can let your mind go wild with those
Yeah,
tools.
that's something that, I just want to put that out there before we close it up. If you're creating content and you are working in industries that are a little less common, for example, if you're working for nonprofits that deal with abuse, or that deal with, say, child neglect, or maybe you're working with a charity that does research for ALS, getting pictures of people with disabilities, or that are more sensitive, those are harder to find in stock photos. So not necessarily want to recreate something that's shocking to people, but getting more diversity out there. AI can help with that. Putting in, I want a female astronaut. Might not be able to find that in Canva, but then a Midjourney would absolutely be able to do that. And so thinking that way is really helpful. So Diego, how can people connect with you online? What's the platform you're most active on? Mention the name of your podcast again, and then I'll make sure in the show notes to also add that in there. But how can people connect with you if they want to know more about you and the tools that you use and systems that you build?
So if you want to find me personally, it's at Diego Amaarali, just as it is on the screen. Just Google me and you'll probably find a list of my website, and LinkedIn is the top result, I think. So that would be one of the best places to reach out. I'm on Twitter, but that has a kind of different audience to it. And my podcast is the confoes.com, confoes.com. So you can find the podcast and what we're creating on there. We've recently migrated to Substack as well, as we're testing a new system. I'm continuously evolving the system. So that's where you can find that as well. And as a closing thought, I'd say, don't stay behind. Just try the tools. Maybe you're not going to use it now, 5 years from now. Just try it, experiment it, get familiar with it, because in the end, you're going to have an edge over the people who don't use it. Don't get left behind.
That's wonderful. Wonderful advice. Diego, thank you so much for your time today. I will be back next week with another episode of Strategy Talks. And I'm going to say goodbye to all of you. Thank you so much for watching live and for listening. Bye, everybody.